Good evening to everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. This is our second series of public meetings to discuss our realignment. And at this time, I am Frank Baker, and I chair the Transportation Ad Hoc Study Committee. And at this time, I would like to recognize some of our committee members. Brian Austin, who is also a board trustee, is a committee member, and he is joining us virtually tonight. We also have with us as a committee member Denise Jones. Ms. Jones, you'll raise your hand. We also have Beverly Collier, and we have our superintendent, Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, back in the back. And board members present tonight are Dr. John B. Hilton, and Dr. Barbara Jackson, and Dr. Gloria Lee. Now, did I miss anybody? Okay. Well, I'm not going to talk long. I'm going to turn our program over to Mr. Matthew Cropper. He is our chief consultant, if you will, in this process. And he will come forward and he will talk a little bit about what we are doing and why we're doing it, and then proceed to give you some information. We will go out into the lobby area and we'll take a look at the map. So at this time, I present to you Mr. Matthew Cropper.
Thank you, Dr. Baker, and thank you all for coming tonight. We do appreciate your interest in this study. I'm Matthew Cropper with Cropper GIS. We are a consulting firm based out of Ohio, but we work remotely. Our staff lives all over the East Coast mostly, and we do this kind of work all across the country. K-12 planning. Our specialty is realignment work, and that's what we're here to help the Sumter School District out with. So you can see we've done work with districts all over the country. We probably do about 10 these types of studies a year, and have been doing them for the past 15 years, and do a lot of small ones, a lot of big ones, working with all districts of all sizes. So we bring to the table a lot of what has and what hasn't worked in other districts across the country, and as well as technology and using our geographic information systems mapping to be able to make accurate decisions. And when we move an area, we can give you an accurate estimate of how many students it would be if you move an area one way or the other. And so that's some of the key things that we help with. Matthew Cropper is myself. I have over 20 years experience in doing this. Also, in addition to school districts, I also do work with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Civil Rights, and help them out with federal desegregation cases across the country. And just a lot of experience in doing this work. And I also have James Cooper with me as well, and he's one of our analysts. He's been helping on this project, as well as dozens of others, lots of experience in doing this work too. And he has been sort of the analytical liaison, managing this project from behind the scenes, the data and everything. So he'll be, James, if you could raise your hand back there. He's back here with me, and we'll be around MAPS after this to talk with you guys if you have any questions. So tonight's purpose is just to give you an overview on how this process works. We want to give you, present to you options 3 and 4. So we've already been sharing these with the committee. If you've seen any of the committee meetings leading up to now, options 3 and 4 are the maps that we're sharing with you tonight. We've weeded out some of the prior options, and these are the 2 options that are still under consideration. And then there's a general feedback form online that we'd like you to go on there and just tell us your thoughts. Tell us what you think about the maps, what you like and what you don't like about those maps. And that can help us drive potential changes for us as we consider, as we continue to work on the process. So a little background, why are we here? So the district, in 2011, prior to 2011, there was a city district and a county district. In 2011, those districts merged, but after they merged, the zone lines for the city and the county were never evaluated holistically, looking at them as one entire school district. So that's really our objective here, is to examine the zones. The district came to us when we first started this, with some concerns about transportation and travel distance for students and things like that, because you have the city district and then the county zones, particularly the high schools, wrap around the city. So we wanted to kind of look and see, is there a way to try to make things more efficient in terms of utilization, but also bring kids closer to home if we can, at all possible. So we have been looking at elementary, middle, and high school. Most of the movement has been in middle school and high school, though, as you'll see. So we're here to ask consultants to facilitate student realignment project, provide options and present options and work with the committee to look at options that leading to a recommendation. We're developing these options and recommendations for all school levels with the focus on the realignment criteria. We want to address some imbalances in utilization of schools. Some schools have more space than others, so we want to try to see if we can provide an equitable amount of space available in all the buildings. And then, like I said, the transportation inefficiencies are some things that have been studying. And then the board will be deliberating on a recommendation in March of this year. So we're coming up to the end line here of this work as we go through this last public information meeting. So we as consultants develop the materials. We're facilitating the whole process, really working through a process so the public can follow what's going on from the start. We've had an online web page for the realignment, so the public can go there and download all the materials and look at maps and provide feedback. So we really value transparency as part of our process, as well as the district. Leveraging our expertise and then ultimately working towards a realignment plan. So let's talk about the criteria. These are the rules to follow as we start looking at boundary lines and evaluating boundary lines. We always ask ourselves, if we need to make a move, is it bringing us closer to adhering to these criteria, or is it taking us further away? The best plan would be one that adheres to these criteria as best as possible. And they are to balance facility utilization, so try to make sure there's an equitable amount of seats available in every building. Account to growth, so we were looking at areas where there is construction and being mindful of that and where the construction is occurring. And if possible, if necessary, maybe give a school a little bit more room so that they can grow in to new residential space that may be being built in that area. Close proximity, trying to assign students close to the home as possible. Maximizing busing efficiencies, transportation, so we're calculating the distance to school, and a lot of that stuff is part of our work. Feeder patterns, so we're looking at the progression of an elementary to a middle. How much of an elementary goes to a middle school, and how much of a middle school goes to a high school. In a perfect world, you want 100% of an elementary, all elementary kids go to the same middle school. Sometimes you have to split that though, and if you have to split it, it's better to have it be a balanced split than just a really small percentage of an elementary going to one middle, and then 95% or something of the rest of the elementary going to another, or middle of high school. So the feeder patterns is a part too. Highest grade at legacy enrollment. So there's been a lot of comments online. People are concerned, saying, well, my student is coming into his senior year of school. It's not fair for them to move at their last year of high school and things like that. Well, this top one really covers that. And the school district has put forth a legacy enrollment provision here so that doesn't have to happen. Students are coming into their senior year. They can finish out at the school that they're at right now. They don't have to get moved. That's also referred to as grandfathering. You may have heard it. But any student who's coming into their 5th grade, or 8th grade, or the 12th grade, on the year that this gets implemented, they can stay at their school. They don't have to move. But they do have to get transportation provided, have their own transportation to school. That's the one caveat. And then and also siblings are not eligible as part of that. So if a 12th grader wants to stay at school, finish out their 12th grade year, and they've got a 9th grade brother or sister, that student will have to move to where they're realigned if they do get moved. We want to minimize the impact on students, so we're counting how many kids are moved in every option. And then looking at the demographics of the schools, what are the current demographics and what are the demographics for the options that we're developing, and just making sure that we maintain the demographic diversity. If we can make the schools more demographically diverse as it relates to the county averages, we certainly will do that. But we also have to keep in mind all the other criteria. So the best plan will be one that touches on all these criteria as a whole, as best as possible, knowing that there are going to be parts of this plan that are not the most ideal. There's going to be always some heartburn when it comes to a realignment plan and moving students. But the best plan will be one that best adheres to these criteria as a whole as best as possible. Establish contiguous zones. So that's saying don't draw a little circle around an apartment complex or a neighborhood or a subdivision and bust them to cross to another school that's outside of their zone. Try to make one zone per school. And then try to use natural boundaries whenever possible to draw the lines. Railroads, rivers, man-made features like the highways, things like that, major roads, those kinds of things are good features to draw the lines along in most cases. And like I said, nothing's in priority or particular order. The best plan is one that touches on all these as a whole as best as possible. So let's take a look at our timeline. So we've been working, this is the first page of the timeline. You can see we started in July. We've been working all the way through. We met with the public in December and shared some options. At that time, I think it was 1B and 2B, and we did that in December. And then you can see as we regrouped in the new year, here we are in February doing our third public information session, just giving you an update and showing you the latest maps that have been considered in their draft form. So as I said, we are getting to near the end of our process. We have one more committee meeting, which is scheduled for March 17th. And that's where we're going to just basically talk about if any changes should be made to these maps, and then ultimately leading to a presentation to the board. We anticipate that whatever the final two maps are, as we get to the end, those maps will be presented to the board for their consideration, and the board will determine which map they would like to approve. And so that's really my thoughts on next steps and how we're going to present this and move forward with this. I don't anticipate a lot of changes being made to these final two maps, not substantial changes at least. At least it's not normal at this phase of the process for a lot of big changes to happen. Maybe some minor adjustments and tweaking and things like that. But we're getting close to a couple of maps that adhere to our objectives and our criteria for the board to consider and deliberate on. And the board, one more thing, if we could go back, the board will be presented with the maps the last week in March, and that's when they will be, the maps will be out of the committee's hands, and it'll be in the board's hands at that time, and then the board can determine what they want to do with the realignment plan. So talking about all the work that we've been doing, like I said, we're coming to nearing the end of our process. Committee has met 6 times through the course of since August, and spent many hours reviewing data and maps and deliberating. We looked at 6 different variations of the maps so far, and here we are with two maps kind of ruled some out, and we're working on 2 maps that the committee feels best adheres to the objectives and criteria and what's best for all children in Sumter County. So we've looked at all kinds of data, and you'll see when you go out to the maps, we have a table, a bunch of statistics on a plot map too, that you can see all the numbers that the committee has been looking at, as well as the maps to help inform them. And we can talk with those about you if you have any questions about some of the data. These maps are still draft. Like I said, changes could be made to these maps still. Nothing is set in stone until the board approves the plan. It's even draft once it leaves the committee's hands and gets into the board's hands. Nothing is final until the board approves the plan. So the committee's charged to recommend, we're looking at recommending an option. maybe bringing 2 maps to the board. It depends on how the board wants to receive this information. But we're looking at either one option or taking both of these maps to the board and letting them determine which one they feel is best, letting the board decide which of the maps they feel is best for Sumter County. But nothing is final until the board approves a plan, and so we're still working with drafts. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we have built for the community to follow the process. We have had a lot of public engagement. There is a Realignment webpage. It's called SumterRealignment.com. You guys can go there anytime on phones or any computer, anything with internet connection. SumterRealignment.com has a lot of information, all the committee meeting materials, maps. The general feedback form is on there. We've received hundreds of comments from the public and giving us feedback through the course of the study. And we also have recordings of the meetings on there, the prior meetings, so people can go on and look at a meeting and look at the materials that were shared. We've also had some public info sessions, like I said. We had one in December, and then this is our second round of in-person public information sessions to share these maps with you and get some feedback from you. And we really want to have some conversations around the maps and see what you guys think. If you have any questions, answer whatever questions we can while we're here in town, and as well as captive audience with the board and some of the ad hoc committee here as well to talk. So when you're looking at the maps, you'll see the background color for every single map represents what's the title shows. So there's the current boundaries. So we've got a set of elementary in the back, current elementary option 3 and 4, and then middle current, middle 3 and 4, and then high school current, high school 3 and 4. So you can kind of look at the current boundaries and how each option is shaped differently. You'll see that there are some labels on the maps. They look like little pink, like a label with a pink halo around them. Those are things like that refer to planning blocks, little small building blocks for realignment. Think of them as pieces of a puzzle and moving these puzzle pieces around to try to balance and make the adjustments that we need to make. You'll see underneath the planning blocks also there's a number that represents the number of students within each planning block. And when we're at the maps, if you have any questions, we can show you what we're talking about. You know, this planning block has 25 kids, this one may have 100, and so on and so forth. Just to help inform you as how many kids live in different small areas throughout the county, and that helps the committee as well as us as consultants when we start looking at making changes. Just another map showing some of the planning blocks. It looks kind of like label soup on the map, but when you look at the large plot map, it becomes just more distinguished. You can see it a little bit easier and better. We have an online map that has all these the 2 options on there. It's at propermap.com/Sumter, and you can pull that up at any time. If you type in your address, it'll zoom in on your address, and it'll pop up a green box if your area is impacted, or bring up a red box. A green box if your area was not impacted, and say you were not impacted by realignment. It'll bring up a red notification if you have been impacted. And you can I used an interactive map to toggle on and off the different options. It's a really useful tool, especially working in a county as large as Sumter. It's helpful when you want to see some detailed line changes. This is just a screenshot showing you the map. You can see that you'll have a layer list on the left. If you open this on the phone, you'll see in the middle of that screen there's a little arrow, looks like a little tab sticking out. And that's usually closed when you open on your phone. You have to touch that little tab that's in the middle of this white line on the left, and that'll expand out your layers. And you can turn on and off options and things like that with the map. It can become a really useful tool, like I said. Some of the tables, quickly show you some of the data that we've got in place here. And then we've got the maps, the tables are outside too, so you can see some of the data. We're working with the 2020, 2021 45th day enrollment data as we're working through this process. So this is just you can see this, we estimate enrollment, we show you what the current enrollment is, and for each option, what is the estimated enrollment. So this is if you wanted to know how many students are they thinking for this school. And then how many are there currently and how many are in each option. This is what you would look at for that. We look at feeder patterns. This shows you the percentage of schools that are split. So in this particular example, if you see a 100, like Ebenezer feeds 100% into Crestwood. You can see 100% on the side. If you look at Alice Drive gets split between Crestwood and Sumter. 51% of Alice Drive goes to Crestwood, 49% of Alice Drive goes to Sumter. So that kind of is how you would interpret the feeder pattern data. We have the same thing in enrollment. We're looking at utilization. So utilization just really means how full is the building. And it's looking at the enrollment divided by the capacity. That gives you a percentage. So if it's 100, if there's 500 students enrolled and there's 500 seats, that school's 100% utilized. But you can see here the utilization shows for the current, and then for each option, what is the estimated utilization of the building. And we're trying to draw them closer to the county average and get things a little bit more in balance. You can see currently, Sumter High School is 84% utilized, and the other two high schools in the county are in the 60s, low 60s. So that's one of the things we're looking at, trying to make a little bit better balance. Impacts, counting how many kids are moved in any particular option. So we've got this for elementary, middle, and high school. How many students are impacted? And then we also have distance and mileage. With our mapping system, we can calculate how many miles each student is from home to school. And then we calculate that as the average of that. And we roll all those numbers up and calculate an average. So you can see the average distance currently and for each option. And Crestwood was one of those schools that wraps around Sumter currently. At 11.22 miles is the average distance for students to get to Crestwood. And you can see we bring those numbers down in every particular option to try to bring them into better, more equitable. And then we've done some ranking. We've basically taken all these statistics and we've developed a process for ranking the options and scoring them. And so this kind of just shows how they're sizing up to each other in terms of the ranking. This doesn't necessarily mean that the number one ranked option will be the one that is chosen. It just kind of helps inform us how the options are working in terms of adherence to the criteria. One of the things that we'll see as you look at these maps is the option 3 is getting a number one rank total for most categories. But option 4 is a look that basically takes a look at reducing the overall impact. So option 4 impacts fewer students by a good number, by about 800 students at the high school level. And so that's a different look with an eye of trying to impact fewer students. So what I'm saying is, this data and information is informing people on the options. It's not necessarily being the overall determinant of which option will be selected or approved by the board. So tonight we've got the options 3 and 4 outside on the walls. Like I said, we're going to be standing around the maps and tables and helping to answer any questions that you may have. We do hope that even though we do have conversations with you, that you participate in the online feedback form and give us your comments online so that we can share that with committee members who weren't here and also the general public as a whole. But we value having these conversations with you and hope that you do kind of give us some more input online. And it's very important to this part of the process. Like I said, SumterRealignment.com is where you can find that feedback form, give us your thoughts. We're not looking to try to see, well, this many people really like this option, so this is the one that we're going to pick. We're looking for comments that help bring us closer to our criteria. And it's a constructive feedback, but anything you have for us, we want to hear. We've been studying all your input, conversations around maps at the last meetings, and then online input from the start, so it's been very helpful. But we will only make changes if it brings us closer to adhering to our criteria. We're not going to make a change just because this number of people wanted us to make a change. We're doing it with an eye on that criteria as the key thing. So next steps, the committee has one more meeting scheduled after tonight's. It's March 17th, so we're going to let these maps simmer for a little bit, about a month, and then we're going to be back with the committee working through the final meeting. Review any feedback that you guys have, determine if any change should be made, and then determine what we're going to present to the board for their consideration and eventually a vote. So that's all I have for the PowerPoint. What we'd like to do now is we'd like to invite you guys out to this back corner. There's a bunch of maps taped on the walls, and we'll meet you out there and we'll have some conversations with you. We really appreciate you guys coming out. Please share with your neighbors and friends and people that you work with about this process, and tell them to go online, sumterrealignment.com, see what they think and give us input as well, okay? But we'll talk with you outside, and thanks again for coming tonight.